That's a good question. So I opened the cafe actually because I was trying to get away from my activism. So I wanted to, I grew up with parents who were activists and in the Ethiopian community. And our whole life was around community. So my dad literally was a guerrilla fighter in Ethiopia. We went to Sudan where I was born and he continued his work there. He was in and out of jail. My mom was like, it wasn't uncommon. Like we'd be sitting at the table having dinner and the police would come and take him off. And she's like, bye, we'll see ya. You know, because it just happened so much. So, we lived that life. And then when we came here through political asylum, my dad started the first Ethiopian church here. And then he continued with like other community work. And so I got to a point where I was really tired, of always being involved. So I was like, I have an idea. I'll do like a product business. I give you a product and you give me money and we all go our own ways. Yeah, right. So I guess when something's in your blood, it's in your blood. Like you can't get away from it. So initially, I wanted to just teach people about coffee, about where coffee comes from. I mean, everyone around the world drinks coffee. It's this big connector, and we don't know where it comes from. And obviously, coffee comes from Ethiopia. And so it was important to me, like my shirt is the different growing regions in Ethiopia where you grow coffee beans. It's not uncommon just to have a coffee tree in your backyard, and you're just get your beans and dry them and roast them at home. And I mean, it's just a very normal thing and part of the culture. But I found that people didn't know that here, that coffee came from Ethiopia. So I wanted to really teach that. So we do we did pre-coronavirus. We would do the Ethiopian coffee ceremony where we would roast, and it's very communal and everyone sits together and shares in this ceremony. It takes about an hour and you roast beans and you brew in the clay pot, and they're like really strong espresso shots, really, really good, like the smoothest coffee you will ever have. And so that was my initial goal with the coffee shop, like to be real simple and honest and transparent. That's what I thought was happening. But that quickly changed. And it changed. The big turning point was when a young woman was killed in this neighborhood. Actually, her name is Jessie Hernandez, and she was killed by police in a car. Her and her friends were parked in an alley, and someone called the police. They showed up, shot into the car, and killed her. And she's a teenager. And there were a group of people who wanted to mourn that. And so they wanted to meet at another coffee shop in the neighborhood, and the coffee shop had the most bizarre response. The owners literally on Facebook said, "You can't meet here, we stand with police." And it was a tragic response to a tragic incident because this community, first of all, they weren't gathering to protest police. They were gathering to mourn. But even if they were, if you can't have controversial conversations in a coffee shop, then we're doomed. Where else are you gonna have those conversations? So I heard that and was like, oh, heck no. Not only can you meet here, but coffee's on the house all day. And the response was incredible. And I didn't realize that that was a void, that activists lacked a home, where they could come and gather and organize and do all of those things. And so that was kind of the turning point for the cafe, where we became known as the activist coffee shop. And I think when that term was first used, it was meant to be a slur, but I'm like, oh, you have no idea who you're talking to. So, and it's just grown and morphed into this incredible community space. I always joke that we're really a community center that sells coffee, more so than a coffee shop. But it's beautiful. I mean, when tragic, terrible things happen in the community, we're that soft landing place where people can come because they don't know where else to go. Even just to mourn, like if you think about that, you can't just go to action. You can't just suddenly start organizing. You have to deal with that pain and that trauma and be able to like release that. And I feel like that's what Whittier Cafe has been for the community. So it's been intense and beautiful and scary and, confusing and all of those things. But we're just sharing in that journey with the community and what people are actually going through. So it's a powerful, powerful organizing place. Someone is literally killed before our eyes now because everything's captured on camera, and we're expected just to go back to work the next day and act like nothing happened. It's trauma, and it's creating PTSD, and people are not able to deal with it. And it's no exaggeration that something like that will happen either locally, because we have terrible policing locally, or on a national level, and people come here to gather and our whole patio is packed and pouring out into the streets and like just taking over the space. Fortunately, our neighbors love us and they all kind of deal with it and participate in it even. And I mean, just the numbers, it just grows and grows and grows. It's actually been one of the tragedies of dealing with all of this during coronavirus, because we can't gather now. We can't be, you know, elbow to elbow here, and we can't hug, and we still do some of that, but we can't, you know, so much of that has been taken away because of the health issues that disproportionately impact Black communities. So that's been really hard to figure out, okay, so what do we do now? What do we look like now, given the current state of everything that's happening? So it's been a little bit of a challenge trying to figure out how we show up today, given everything that's happening. Like you see, one of our garden signs is we're fighting two pandemics or two diseases, racism and COVID. How do we deal with this? So it's been interesting to see what that looks like at the cafe and how we do that, because people still call and people come by, and you know, we're I think still figuring out what that's going to look like, but it's been intense.